Hello and welcome back to the arena. Today we're going to dive a little bit more into draft and talk about basic draft strategy as well as some specific pick decisions, and then roll over into constructing a deck from what may be a suboptimal draft pool. And from there we will close out by talking about the overall rewards of drafting, because I have found that it really is the fastest and most reliable way to build your collection. Now, while I have some very specific draft criteria up on the screen for you to review, the basic idea is that you are drafting to build your collection and build the value within that collection rather than trying to build a specific draft deck. In other words, we are trying to win the war and not necessarily win. Now, jumping into a draft, you see that I very quickly took the mythic from the pack and moved on here to pack 1, pick 2, selecting an uncommon that, at least in theory, may go with the deck that I have developed so far, even though we are only one card in. The nice thing about the Bolt Hound here is it is also on my shopping list, and I have specific plans for that card as the season progresses. Moving on to our next pick here, you can see I have exhausted rare and uncommon picks, and I am making the first common pick of the pack. And with that, going with a red common to try and continue that red theme that we're going for so far. It also happens to be a common that I need for my collection. That having been said, moving on to our next pick, there are 2 uncommons here, both of which I do not need for my collection, but I see a colorless common that can fit into any deck, and since we are only about halfway through pack 1, flexibility wins the day here, because that common colorless can literally fit into any deck that may evolve. And we'll continue forth here. Here we have a set of commons that really are not needed for the deck themselves. None of them are contributing in any meaningful way to the deck that has evolved thus far. So I end up taking a common that I know I need for my collection, even though moving directly into pick 9. Again, I don't have a lot to choose from here. The uncommon is not something I need for my collection, but I do pick up the Lofty Denial, as it is something that will go very nicely into a blue-white skies deck for years to come, that being one of the basic draft archetypes that evolves into a standard deck. So I know that's a common I need, and I will continue to use for years. Moving into pack 2, I very quickly picked up the rare, and here we are in pack 2, pick 2. I take an uncommon, which doesn't necessarily help this deck, but does allow for an entire archetype, that being the blue mill. I know that's something I wanted for my collection, so here it is a quick and simple pick, even though it doesn't help my draft deck. Here I am faced with 2 uncommons that I know I don't need for my collection, so I move very quickly into a red common that I both need for my collection and potentially helps the deck here, as I have picked a lot of rare cards, and a red 1-drop is probably going to be an easy include in our final deck, even though we're not quite halfway through all of our picks. Jumping ahead here to pack 2, pick 11, there's really nothing here that I need, so I end up taking an uncommon that I know I already have 4 of, simply because it adds 3 points to my vault, whereas taking the common would only add 1. This is really a hard-nosed case of taking the highest available value when there really is no value to be had. Moving here into pack 2, or excuse me, pack 3, pick 5. We have just gone through 4 rare picks in a row. Really an extraordinarily good pack for us in the draft, and I end up going with a build around uncommon that will have little to no impact on this deck. But again, I know Blue White Skies is a reoccurring deck that I will build and use for years. Moving then to pack 3, pick 6. Still getting multiple uncommons despite all of the crazy amount of rares within this pack. I am able here to go with a red uncommon that will not only potentially help this deck, but also fill a healthy role in building my collection. Here in pick 10, we see a classic late uncommon. This particular one is very surprising and kind of illustrates the benefit of drafting against the robots in the quick draft. Not only is this a late uncommon, but it is a very good uncommon, kind of a staple within the black sacrifice archetype, and is really a very nice addition to the collection, even though it may or may not do anything for this particular deck. Moving then into our rares, what you see here is all the rares that we drafted within this particular draft, 7 in total, one of which is a dual land. You will also see there is a common dual land that was added to the photo by mistake. But overall, 7 rares. That's a 40% increase over just opening the packs, where you would have expected to get 5 random rares or mythics. Also, our uncommons, we had a 60% increase to our uncommons here over just opening packs, with a total of 16. The real question then becomes, how do we turn this pile of random collection value into a deck that we may be able to pilot for some wins? The answer to that is actually built within Magic Arena's deck builder system. It automatically monitors all of your cards and then suggests lands to go with those. So making sure that your auto land tool or suggest land tool is turned on, it will let you know what are your weakest colors. As you can see here, if we remove the 2 non-basic lands, our mountains actually go up a little bit, and we see very clearly that the first thing we want to cut is the colors blue and white, because there is simply not enough cards there for us to build a deck around. Having done that, we'll take a look at our results. And what we end up with is a nice green and red deck with a splash of black. Pretty well focused, and not a bad deck overall, but we're still running 7 too many cards. As you can see from the land tool, black would be our next cut, but if we cut black entirely, we would not have enough cards to submit a 40 card deck. Taking a quick look at our deck statistics, we see that our creatures are a little on the low side, and that our non-creature cards are a little higher. So what I end up doing is cutting the non-creature black cards and splashing in for black creatures. Again, like those uncommon black 1-drops that really add a lot of potential value to the deck. And what we end up with is a 3-colored deck, and I think either the auto land tool may have gotten turned off, or perhaps I just disagree with it. I really think we're 1 swamp high here and 1 mountain short. I didn't realize it at the time, but I think it cost me at least 1 game where I could not get enough red mana to cast all the spells I wanted. But overall, this shows you how to take a deck and turn it into a winning value. As demonstrated on screen, we did end up getting 1 win on this and literally doubling the value of having just dropped out of the draft. We got the 100 gems and 2 packs, which basically turns your drafting from a 15 draft in order to earn enough gems to draft again down to 7.5. We could have just dropped with the value that we drafted and really have felt okay about it, but really learning to pilot a draft pile, if you would, a random disjointed pile of cards that really have very little synergy or even color stability, and turning that into one or more wins adds a lot of value to our collection in the long run. It's really what I suggest, and developing that skill will allow you to then have drafts like this, my second draft for the weekend, where I went 4 wins on a draft where I picked up 7 rares and 17 uncommons. Really just a huge turn in development, and the reason that I suggest developing this skill for yourself and for your collection. Until next time, we'll see you in the arena.